At his rally in Atlanta, Georgia last Saturday, Donald Trump slammed Governor Brian Kemp and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, both Republicans, for refusing to help overturn the 2020 election. He complained about them, accused them of doing everything possible to make 2024 difficult for Republicans to win. And after Trump repeated his age-old lie that he won Georgia in 2020, he then pivoted to praising some other Georgia officials.
I don't know if you've heard, but the Georgia State Election Board is in a very positive way. This is a very positive thing, Marjorie. They're on fire. They're doing a great job. 3 members, Janice Johnson, Rick Jeffries, and Janelle King. 3 people are all pit bulls fighting for honesty, transparency, and victory. They're fighting.
Those people Trump just name-checked are 3 of the 5 members of Georgia's State Board of Elections, Marjorie. They're all Republicans, and all of them have questioned the results of the 2020 election. Well, this past Tuesday, in a 3-2 vote, those 3 pit bulls approved a rule that threatens to upend how elections are certified in Georgia. The new rule empowers county election board members to conduct a, quote, reasonable inquiry, end quote, into whether election results are complete and accurate before they certify them. However, the new rule doesn't define what a reasonable inquiry entails, meaning that election officials in Georgia's 159 counties can each decide for themselves what they consider to be reasonable. Legal experts have expressed concern that the rule could be used as justification not to certify votes for partisan reasons or to further the baseless allegations of election fraud that Trump and his MAGA ilk have been pushing for years. And that's the problem. Democratic elections attorney Mark Elias said the new rule is, quote, another powerful tool in Trump's election subversion arsenal, saying, quote, he wants to be able to pick and choose which election results are accepted based solely on the outcome. This rule is a step in that direction, end quote. Fast forward to Wednesday, when the State Board of Elections met again. This time, those same 3 pit bulls voted to ask the state's Attorney General, Christopher Carr, to reopen an investigation into how Fulton County, Fulton County, Georgia, which is essentially Atlanta, handled the 2020 election. The board members want to revisit the case of about 3,000 ballots from Fulton County that were erroneously double scanned, a mistake that Fulton County admitted to. Ironically, the actual votes on those ballots disproportionately favored Donald Trump and wouldn't have benefited Biden. Georgia is a critically important battleground state, and this election will certainly be a close one. But as the Georgia GOP appears to be working hard to revise voting rules in their favor, it may not be an even playing field. After a break, I'll talk to the sole Democratic member of the Georgia Board of Elections. Joining me now is Sarah Tindall Gezell, the sole Democratic member of the Georgia Board of Elections. Sarah, good to see you again. You and I talked the other day, but I thought this was such an important conversation. I'd like to have it again with you a little more completely. I'm trying to get my head around this. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an elections official. So I'm trying to understand what this concept of reasonable inquiry that anybody, that elections people in any of the 159 counties can say. So they can count the votes. They can say they were, whatever, they were counted, the machines worked, all that kind of stuff. But they can come up with something called a reasonable inquiry, and we don't know what that means exactly.
And that's exactly the problem. The Georgia statute defines the canvass process and certification very specifically in law. You make sure that every valid vote was tabulated and is included in those vote totals. And the law describes exactly where you need to look, what you need to look for, and how you do that process. And it also describes that by 5 o'clock on the Monday after the election, counties must certify those elections. The law says they shall certify. That means it is a mandatory process. They have no discretion in it. So entering into the rules as a phrase like reasonable inquiry creates uncertainty. And that appears to me to be the whole purpose of it.
Well, are there, I would think that if one were to say, given what has happened in Georgia in the past or in any state, these are the categories. If this happens, you can have an inquiry. If this happens, you can have an inquiry. For specific things, the machine overcounts, double counts, whatever the case is. Are there safeguards in place to prevent this rule from being used arbitrarily to delay or deny vote certifications?
Well, like I said, the law still says that certification shall happen. So the courts are the safeguard in place. The Secretary of State has announced that he expects every county to certify by 5 p.m. on Monday afterwards. But you have to take this rule in context, which is there's also an ongoing court case spearheaded by the same board member who has been pushing some of these rules in Fulton County that, and the legal theory of the case is they are literally trying to force the courts to change certification into a discretionary task. And they are represented by the America First Policy Institute. So this is not just a good faith effort to make sure our county boards are doing their jobs. This is a deliberate and coordinated effort to undermine the certification process.
So let's talk about courts. Is there a likelihood that this particular new rule will be challenged in court? And is there a risk, perhaps, that lawsuits will come once counties start either counting or missing certification deadlines? Because that's what everybody's worried about, right? Are we not going to know how Georgia voted for weeks or months after the election?
Right. So I do expect that there will be court challenges to the rules because obviously it is an unlawful use of administrative authority to pass a rule that does not comport with the law. And in my view, that's what we've just done is we're violating state statute with this rule. But I also expect that there will be court challenges if a county refuses to certify.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about the Fulton County situation? Because that was adjudicated. This is part of the issue, that everything that went right or wrong in the 2020 election has been adjudicated. So Fulton County did have an issue. It would not have benefited Donald Trump regardless, but it was adjudicated. They figured out what was wrong and in theory have fixed it. Tell me a bit about that, please.
Right. So this is probably the sixth or seventh, I haven't counted, but number of investigations into what happened in Fulton County in 2020. And the last one was exactly how you described it. There were a batch of ballots, 3,000 and a handful, that were scanned twice. Did not affect the vote totals because they were not for one candidate. In fact, as you pointed out, disproportionately for the former president. And the county has changed everything since 2020. They have changed their headquarters. They have changed their leadership. The board has changed. But most importantly, they've added lots of new procedures in place and safeguards to prevent this from happening again. And that's been the primary focus of the board, is to make sure that, yes, we acknowledge what happened, make sure that Fulton County doesn't do this again, and that we are looking forward to 2024 to make sure that everybody's vote is counted accurately and the results reflect the will of the voters. That's what elections are all about.
Notwithstanding the politicization of this part of the process, are you, as a Georgia State Board, state election board member, confident in Georgia's ability to execute the election and count the ballots, notwithstanding the fact that 159 counties can all do this inquiry, reasonable inquiry? Do you think that the election can be fair in Georgia?
I absolutely believe the election can be fair in Georgia if we are operating on the rules that we have today. The problem is this board is now trying to change the rules 90 days before the election, 86 days before the election. We entered into rulemaking something that would change the way absentee ballots are accepted. It won't go into force until 40 days before the election. There's another rule that we entered into rulemaking that would change the way that absentee ballots and emergency ballots are printed. It won't come into force until after our overseas and military ballots have already been mailed out. And that is deeply concerning to me, that they're changing the rules at the last second. And that is where chaos happens.